Hi, I'm Resident of Colorwood for YouTube. Joel Sands. That's my buddy Alan Gallant. That's my buddy Patrick McCray. We're here to review the movie The Private Eyes, starring Don Knotts and Tim Conway, who wrote this movie, by the way, with
I think he improved his part of the writing. I think that's what.
Yeah, him and a man named John Myers. Anyway, yeah. So
yeah.
They wrote this movie. Tim Conway was also in this movie with Don Knotts. Don Knotts. Yeah. This is basically a Sherlock Holmes spoof in a weird way. First question, Alan, when did you first see this?
Actually, I first saw this about 3 hours ago.
Ooh.
This is one of their movies I hadn't seen before. I mean, they'd obviously teamed up several times in the past. And this was a movie that was like, it could have been made in 1970 along with the other ones, you know. The formula works.
This was made in 79.
Yeah, it was made in 79, 80. It was released in 80. Yeah. So, but I'm saying it could have been made in 70 along, you know, with some of the other ones that they made in those earlier incarnations. Yeah.
So Alan, sorry if I interrupted you. All seriousness, do you have a gun that shoots by the hour? I have to know.
Oh, yeah. It's my love gun. Kiss reference only. Kiss reference. Yeah.
Kiss reference. Okay. Patrick McCray, when did you first see this movie, man?
I saw it in 1980, I guess, when it came out.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm like Alan. I saw this a couple hours ago. Really, really interesting. I get their spoof in Sherlock Holmes. I do think some of this I love the house setting. They have a nice setting for the house.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
And all the that looks beautiful.
You can go there. It's called the Biltmore.
They filmed this at the Biltmore.
It's an enormous mansion, and it has an enormous grounds on it. And you can take the 10-cent tour. You can take the backstage tour. You can do all sorts of stuff there. It's a great place to go. I highly recommend it.
So Jewel, this is the house from Being There.
Yes. Yeah, I thought I recognized it when it was in the. I'm like, wait, this house looks familiar.
Oh yeah.
Now they use it for different purposes in this movie. They got all these secret passages in a house. Now here's a question for you guys: was the secret passages just some sets, or what was going on there? Do you guys know?
There was a mix.
Yeah, there was a mix of stuff, but I think some of it was. I would think that the flipping walls and stuff were probably some kind of a set. And then when they go into basements and sort of things, depending on what they allowed them to do, they could have been in the Biltmore, some of the basement stuff. And certainly the great rooms and all that wonderful stuff was Biltmore.
So this film opens with a murder. Or at least an apparent murder, and the detectives are basically called upon, if you will, by the Yard, as they reference every so often in this movie. What did you guys think of the overall plot of this film?
It's not a spice ball of nuance.
No. If you look at it, I think they took an idea and they said, here's what we're going to do and here's where we're going to end up. And everything in between was fair game, I think, in terms of the kind of routines that those two guys were used to doing with one another. And in this case, it was like Tim Conway is one of the few people that can make Don Knotts look erudite.
Yeah.
And he does. In some ways. I mean, Don Knotts is still doing stupid things too, but his whole attitude is much more urbane and knowledgeable than you might think from some of the other movies that Knotts has done in the characterizations that he's played. And that's because of Tim Conway. He's just being the absolute goofus throughout this.
This is just my opinion. It felt like at times, and I know there's like a murder, it felt like they couldn't decide whether they wanted a murder mystery or a haunted house at times. And what do you guys think?
It's a murder mystery in a haunted
In a
house.
haunted
In a
house.
haunted house.
The haunted house stuff is also tried and true from some of the earlier Don Knotts movies, The Ghost of Mr. Chicken, some of that sort of thing.
Marathon Man.
Yes.
And of course, they were both in the French Connection.
That's true. They were, and it was actually originally titled The French Disconnection, but you know how it goes. But yeah, some of the tropes in this movie have been used before by these comedians, and some of the environmental milieus, and the haunted house thing is definitely part of that whole thing. And it also gave them, it's like, okay, here's the haunted house set, guys. Go in there and play around for a while, see what you come up with. And I just suspect this is what happened. I'm not sure. I wasn't there, but I just suspect because of the way that Tim Conway can riff a scene and the way that he did for years and years on the Carol Burnett show.
I wonder,
comfortable with that.
Jewel, if you were to look up the writer of this film, the one who's not Tim Conway, I wonder if he wrote for the Carol Burnett show.
Hold on, I'll give it a check. Well, hold on, I'll make sure I get his name.
Because the timeline is right.
About right. It's only 3 years after Carol Burnett's done.
Yes. So that's really 2 years if you look at
79.
how long it took to shoot the movie.
That's right.
And so if they wrote the movie after Carol Burnett, that means they took a year off.
Sure.
Or they wrote it during or they wrote it while they were shooting the show.
Yeah, it's possible because script treatments happen usually a reasonable amount of time before they're actually accepted for production, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah. Whereas James Aubrey insisted on cutting 45 minutes, any 45 minutes, and so it made Sam Hall's script unintelligible.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Curtis never forgave them for what they did to the Private Eyes.
That's right.
The privatization of comedy.
He had to keep it private, though.
Jewel, you're lighting up.
I'm reading John Myers' IMDb page for writing and everything. Here's one. He did write an episode for The Incredible Hulk. One episode. I did make sure I clicked for writing. Yeah, right. Let's see. One episode for the 1985 Twilight series. Fantasy Island, 6 episodes. History of the World Part 1, 1981. The Magical World of Disney, 2 episodes.
What do you mean, History of the World? Whoa. History of the World Part 1?
He was for an actor, he was leader of the Senate, the Roman Empire. So.
Oh, he was an actor.
Well, that means he must know shtick. That says a lot.
I think what he did is he wrote the skeleton of this thing.
Okay, I have 6 previous things he's written. Okay, here we go. It clicked over. Saturday Night in the Apple Valley, 1965. I can't pronounce this, but Paesano, A Voice in the Night,
19.
Yeah, 1975. The Prize Fighter, 1979. The Private Eyes, 1980. Operation Rescue, 1986, and Terror in Beverly Hills, 1989. The rest of the listings are for actors. So.
Seems to be that he wrote a lot of drama and some shtick in terms of what he got paid for or credit for. So he was writing a lot of different things.
Well, I also have his Wikipedia up here, so I'm going to double check this. If you guys want to go ahead and talk while I'm looking this over, please do.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Yes, I This is a movie that I want to like more than I do. I do accept it for what it is, but I want to like it more than I do. And oh, you task me, Private Eyes. You task me.
I think
You
it has
know?
with it's not. I don't know if it's editing or pacing or something. Which
Yeah.
again, I think they were. This was the last movie they made together. They did another. They did a cameo in Cannonball Run a couple
That
years.
doesn't count.
Does not count. This is the last one they did together, and I'm wondering if the lust had all died by the time they were done with it, because it is not as frenetic or as energetic as some of their previous work together. The pacing is a little bit more deliberate in a lot of these sort of setups, these latsies that they're doing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what struck me. I still enjoyed it to a point, but I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's
It's a challenge that way.
Mhm.
And some of it is that the Love God was in some ways a little ahead of its time. By this point, this is a little behind its time.
Right.
You know,
They
so
had
that's
yeah, they had a great supporting cast too. They had a lot of really good character people, particularly Bernard Fox, of course, who is
this is surprising to see him in this.
We all know him as Dr. Bombay. If you've seen enough episodes of Bewitched, it doesn't take very many before he shows up. Grace Zabriskie, who has over the last number of years done a lot of dramatic stuff. But the last big role I saw her in was in The Judge. She played the white trash mama in The Judge. Yeah, that's her. That's her as a significantly older woman. She's like 30 years older, 25 to 30 years older. But she does. You still see her pop up a lot. She's in her 70s now.
Interesting.
Yeah, and Tricia Noble. She did a number of cheesecake things back in the day. I think she might have been on Benny Hill. Those kind of shows, I think. Let me double check that. I might be. She was. Let's see. She's an Australian, and was a teen singer back in the day, back in the early '60s. She was also on Mary Tyler Moore Show, Columbo, Beretta, Macmillan and Wife, Rockford Files, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. She was in Revenge of the Sith, Mother of Padme, and I think I'm confusing her with somebody else because I'm not seeing her in there.
She gives a good negligee monologue.
Oh yeah, she does. That whole scene was kind of. That's like everything else is sort of super family friendly, and that one is horny adolescent and up. That's it was.
There was a gag that I think they should have done that they didn't, that I thought was coming. And it's when Don Knotts asks him if he took notes, that then Tim Conway would recite it word for word.
Yeah.
In some sort of.
You didn't expect it. It's like it was just there.
Yeah. He says, "Well, I'm glad you wrote that down. I didn't write it down." That's the punchline.
Yes.
There's nothing on John Myers doing the Carol Burnett show. So he appeared in as an actor, he did appear in a good number of television shows.
As opposed to a number of good television shows.
Right. Oh, you know what it was? I was confusing her with Susie Mandel, who played the maid.
Oh, so Susie Mandel's great.
Yeah,
I love her as the maid.
yeah, yeah.
And I do think she was on Benny Hill.
She was. She was. I
Yeah.
was confusing the two of those. That was what. Because I had done a little bit of research before I watched it, and a little bit more afterwards. But she was married. Susie Mandel was married to Stanley Margolis.
What did you? Because before we get to the end of the movie, there are some questions I have for you guys. Sorry if I interrupted you.
No,
Not a problem.
What did you guys think of the way they killed off some of the characters?
It sort of prefigured like Clue or something, in a kind of a, kind of a fuzzy way. But
yeah, you talking, and I got something to say right about that.
Okay. I mean, obviously they were trying to go for the most, an outlandish thing that these two other actors could work around. So you had all this stuff happening where the body would flop on top of them, or they would discover it in the dumbwaiter, all these sort of sight gagging things that were going on. So
I can barely move. I have pulled so many muscles trying to like Clue. And I have tried to like Clue since it came out. Few films have better casts.
Yeah, speaking of casts, yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely it's not a good movie. It's not funny.
Right. It's also I think people, when it came out, people got off on the style of it, or the double take style.
I tried. I saw it when it came out.
But a lot of people did. Is what I'm saying is it's a taste. I'm not sure anybody can acquire it. I think you're born with it. You either you like that kind of stuff, or you can't quite do it. In spite of the fact that there were a bunch of great actors in it, and they were.
Yeah. You know who else doesn't like Clue?
Who?
Julie Saints.
It's not a good movie.
I've only seen it once. I mean, I wasn't compelled to watch it again.
It's and it is inexplicably beloved, and I don't know why. And I have read the play version with different casts, funny casts who start to do funny things, and then it's just like it runs out of funny for them to do, and it never quite fulfills its promise. Anyway, this is where I was going with Clue. Because there's a third movie in this. You mentioned Private Eyes, you mentioned Clue. There's a third movie in this we have not talked about, and that's Murder by Death.
Yes.
The Neil Simon film with Peter Sellers and David Niven, and Truman Capote.
Truman Capote, yeah.
Which is a very good movie.
It is.
It's a weird movie, but it's a really good, very surreal.
Yeah.
Surreal movie. And so yeah, it's a good movie. And so if you take Murder by Death plus minus The Private Eyes equals Clue.
But it doesn't quite go over the hill, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
it makes its way up the hill.
You're subtracting Private Eyes from Murder by Death, and the result is Clue.
Okay.
It's not as mildly unimpressive as The Private Eyes.
Right.
It's
but it's nowhere near as good as Murder by Death.
It's not as near as good as Murder by Death.
Right.
And with that, gentlemen, I do have to leave you a bit early. I'm sorry. I'm getting messages that just keep coming in, and I have to attend to them, and I apologize.
It's okay, Patrick.
Arrivederci, baby.
See you later.
Talk to me about this, Alan, that, Clue, Murder by Death, because I've never seen Murder by Death.
Okay, well, Murder by Death is a total lampooning of your typical Agatha Christie murder mystery film. And it's got an all-star cast, and it's just absolute silliness. It just makes fun of all the sort of standard things that they do in these movies. Ultimately, it makes huge fun of the detective gets everybody in the room together and who's guilty, you know, that kind of a situation. And it's just a bunch of ridiculous situations, basically. Whereas with Clue, you have the setup for ridiculous situations, or at least ridiculous reactions to situations that don't quite make it over the hill for some people. Some people love it. Some people love it just for the style of it, I think. But I typically tend to agree with Patrick on this one, that it doesn't quite go over into that raucous sort of humor that you would expect from, like, say, oh, this could have gone into Monty Python territory or something, and it doesn't do that. It doesn't do that.
With the board game clip, because I always talk board game or video game movies throughout my life. I've talked about them ever since I was a kid.
Sure, because they've been hugely popular.
Yeah, because the
video game movies, you know, all of that stuff.
Yeah, the games we grew up with, they were popular.
Right.
And some of them still are. Like, for example, if somebody came up to me and said, hey, they're going to make a Monopoly movie, my question would be, why? Like, you know, I mean, like,
and how would you make that work? I'm not sure how you make it work, because it's such a universal game. The players are universally anybody.
Yeah.
It's the game itself that's the star, you know.
Now, I think are there board games or video games that take a while to catch on as movies, depending on the studio who makes them? Yes, I'll give one example. I didn't like the first Dungeons and Dragons movie, but I love the most recent one. It's pretty good. It's good.
Yeah.
I think it's entertaining. It connects with me, and it had not a great story, but a decent enough story for me to follow along with.
Right. Well, once in a while, you get a sequel that actually sort of works the kinks out, and it is better than the first movie. You know, once in a while you get that, because you've got a writing team that knows what they're doing, and they're actually doing their homework, and they're familiar with the topic and subject matter. If it, you know, in this case, it has to be a game, so you know, maybe they play the game, so they know it. But they also look at the first movie and say, where did this go right? Where did it go wrong? That kind of thing. So sometimes it happens that way. All too often it happens that a first movie that's really good or popular, and then they make the sequel and it's not as good. You know, it's not quite there. It might be good, but maybe not as good. It doesn't have the impact. But sometimes it's the opposite. I've seen it happen for sure.
And then there's other games like the first Super Mario Brothers movie, which wasn't, you know, depending on who you ask, is hit or miss.
Right.
I lean on the fence on this because there are some good things about it, and then there are not so good things about it.
Well, the most recent one was an enormous hit. It made like a ridiculous amount of money. It was an enormous hit. It was great. I guess it was a good family movie, you know.
And that's it. That's it right there. They appeal to kids.
Yeah.
I think when you do Mario, I don't think it was a mistake to do Mario live action, because what I've heard throughout the years now was, well, they wanted it to be a darker movie, but then they realized Mario was for kids. Here's the thing. If you play the Mario games, Bowser at times can be pretty dark.
Right, sure.
Like, that's every video. Like, even kids growing up during that era understand that the villains are villains. They're dark as hell, and you're saving the princess for a reason.
Right, exactly.
You know, I think sometimes Hollywood or studios in general underestimate how frequently kids have played said video game, and they think, oh, the kid's going to be scarred if they see this on film. It's like, not really. Consider what came out in the 90s, The Crow and stuff. No, not really.
Right.
And I do think
you have to be able to get into your audience's head to see how they actually think of these popular characters. You know, you have to be able to do that as a producer, as a writer, as an actor, even in these films. if you can do that successfully, that's when you have a mega hit on your hands. If you can't, then it falls on its face. Like, what was the one that Raul Julia did for his
Street Fighter?
He did it for his grandkids, I guess, and he played M. Bison.
Yeah.
And I guess he chewed the scenery in that movie and was great in the movie, but the movie itself was not good.
And the reason that movie was not good is because the writing team, I don't think, had a clue what to do with all these characters.
Right.
And here's the thing. Could I see, because Street Fighter, that's the thing. A lot of games, depending on how the gameplay is, the Street Fighter is a fighting game where you're fighting either the computer or B, each other.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a movie, if you watch the Street Fighter live action and then go watch the Street Fighter animated movie, what a world difference.
Sure.
I mean, and it's like the Street Fighter animated movie that came out in, like, I think in the 80s or 90s was a lot better than the live action, and the live action movie has Jean-Claude Van Damme.
I know.
It's just
it doesn't translate for some reason, because the game itself is so in that world of computer animation.
Here's the thing. I like how they did Bison in the movie. He nailed the part.
Oh yeah, he was good because he's a great actor. I mean, he was a great actor, so he committed to it.
I won't say Street Fighter is the first movie to do this, but they are a movie that did this, and it's a movie. It's just because you're going off a video game, and I'm going to kick myself for saying this because I'm a huge video game fan. You shouldn't always lean into fan service.
Yeah.
If you're planning a franchise for Street Fighter, you don't have to have every character in the first movie.
I wouldn't think so. I think that you'd pick your focus and commit to that for the first story, and then on and on.
And here's the thing here's what the difference. Here's what the animated did compared to live action. The animated, Bison had robots that would spy on the fighters to get their data.
Mm-hmm.
And that made sense.
Yeah.
Because he was looking to become the most powerful fighter on the planet.
Right.
That plot makes sense to have world domination, and he wants with the live action movie, that isn't necessarily going on. He's not spying on all these fighters. He just has a lot of people under him who work for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, take a lot of that away, and I think if you just have Ralph Julia, finding a way to try to take over the world by fighting would have been a better movie than what they did. I do think that, have you ever seen the Silent Hill movie, the first one?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, that.
So, not when it first came out, but when it went to cable.
That for the most part they got right.
Mm-hmm.
From a video game standpoint, from a movie standpoint, from a look standpoint, everything. Now the biggest difference is for the movie, though fictionally it's set in West Virginia, they're using the story. They're using how the town had coal fires underneath the ground. Where they're getting that from is from Centralia, Pennsylvania. That's where they're somewhat getting that story.
Yeah.
The rest of it they're taking from the game, but they're changing minor things. They're using some of Harry Vincent's some of Harry Mason's and some of James Sunderland's. They're mixing the two for this woman character. Now, some of her are some creatures hers. Yes, the nurses are hers, which is scary as hell. Because in Silent Hill there was sex and death went hand in hand. In those games, I mean, I won't get into Silent Hill 3 for children purposes on this channel. Um,
Yes.
it's an interesting game.
Yeah.
But for the movie Clue, here's why I think some people like it and some people don't. I guess I'll speak for myself for the most part. It, all the cast in it are full of talented people.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it isn't the plot itself carrying the movie, because if you're
No, it's
to me,
characterization.
yeah, it's the characters
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
And it's the actors, the way they're portraying the characters, because they're selling their ass off throughout the movie.
Yeah. In terms of that, yes, because they're all good actors. You know, Leslie Ann Down's character is a scream, and people always talk about that character. Tim Curry's character,
Yeah.
you know, as the butler. Those are, you know, kind of linchpin characters in this movie. But again, it doesn't have as much to do with the plot in this case. And I think that the same is true of what happens in you know, the Private Eyes too. There's these two guys who are well known for doing shtick and have done shtick together, these comedy routines together in several movies. And so let's do it again in this setting and see what happens. And some of it works okay, and it's kind of familiar but funny stuff. And some of it just seems a little slow to me.
I don't want to Monday morning quarterback this movie because there are things I like about it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I tend to accentuate the positive about things.
Yeah.
It's an imperfect movie, but it has some good stuff.
I think I would have changed two things. Number one, don't say you're from the yard. Like what felt like to me every 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I like
Especially
I
since
don't
they're Americans.
like I get it's a gag,
Yeah.
but it's like I don't need reminded of it either.
Right.
Number two, you can have the murder and sort of the element of ghost, because I do think that's something both actors do a really good job of selling. Oh, is this place haunted? You know?
Yeah.
It has really good effect.
It's almost like Abbott and Costello, you know.
Oh yeah,
that kind of stuff. It's kind of reminded me of that.
I feel that's more of an element they should have leaned into a bit with this movie. And instead of having Knotts as the detective, I would have had Knotts sort of be like a Vincent Price character, where he's like, "Good evening," like
something different. Yeah, something typical for him, but still having like trip and stub his toe and do things like that.
Yeah,
but
like he's
great at. So,
like he has an axe, like he could have like there was that night with the axe. Like instead of having that in like the dungeon room, have it like in the hallway, and he's holding an axe. He goes, "Look at this." He goes, "Why are you holding an axe?" And he's like, "I don't know. It just got in my hand." But
yeah, you could do silliness from a different angle for them.
Yeah.
For me, I think if it were paced up a little bit and the energy were a little bit better, their energy isn't like I mentioned before. Their energy isn't what it's like in some of their earlier movies together. It's not as frenetic, and you have to stay ahead of the audience when you're doing these kind of goofy gags. You can't let the audience catch up with you and anticipate what you're going to do next.
Sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, not at all.
Okay, sorry. What Alan's referring to is the two comedic actors of Conway and Knotts achieved success on screen when they appeared in several family-friendly feature films for Disney. The Apple Dumpling Gang, 1975. Gus, 1976. The only one not to feature the two on screen together was the Apple Dumpling Gang Rides Again, which was 1979.
Yes.
But Conway and John Myers wrote a screenplay which became The Prize Fighter is Why. And after its success at the box office in 1979 and in rentals, Conway and Myers wrote another Knotts and Conway team up, which is The Private Eyes, which is
right. And this one was relatively successful too. It only cost less than $3 million to make. I think it made somewhere around $18-20 million. So it was relatively successful as a modest. It's not a blockbuster, but it still made money. So,
I have a trivia question for you, Alan. If you know, do you know who at New World Pictures was under?
no, I don't.
Roger Corman.
Oh, Corman. Perfect. That's why the budgets were so low. The guy knew how to make chicken salad. That's all I'm going to say about
that. He did. Oh, man. I will say, too, sometimes with duos, like, again, I wasn't alive during this era, so I can't speak on that part, but sometimes with duos, sometimes you watch them to the point you get sick of them. I don't think that's the case here in this movie that people got.
No, I think they might have gotten a little sick of each other.
Yeah, that I agree with.
Like I say, the energy in this movie was not the greatest. I'd watched these guys separately since the 60s. When I was a little boy, Tim Conway was on McHale's Navy with Ernest Borgnine and all those guys. And of course, he ended up going on to being on the Carol Burnett show for 10 years, or in eight or 10 years. And Don Knotts, I used to sit and watch the Andy Griffith show all the time. Back when they had a lot of those rural shows on, like the Beverly Hillbillies and Green Acres and all that stuff. That was right up my alley because I was a little boy in the 60s and early 70s. So I knew those guys from almost day one in terms of their profile. They all came out television. I mean, that was their big thing. So,
what's your favorite Don Knotts movie?
Tough one. I still have yet to see the one that I missed here the other night. But probably maybe Ghost and Mr. Chicken. It's kind of frenetic and crazy and interesting. There are a couple in that Disney vein where he was working by himself and he wasn't working with a partner. I mean, he was. I mean, there was an acting company, but he wasn't working directly with a partner. And Mr. Limpet's pretty good. I remember seeing those movies when I was a kid, so they had a good impression on me. I remember thinking that they had some jump scares in them, but they were overall they were just kind of funny for a kid to watch. So,
what do you give this movie? 1 out of 10.
I'm going to give it because of the experience and cumulative honors that these two comedians have racked up by this time. I'm gonna give it a 7.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a slightly better grade than you. Because I do think what I love the house and the way they do the effects are really classic in this. They don't really like the plot doesn't lose you. I do love the mixture of the shadow character and the woman. Like when the woman pulls the gun, it's like come on, you didn't know.
It's very Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, it is.
In a lot of ways, it's kind of Scooby-Doo. So yeah,
I sort of wonder too because by this time Knotts had voiced Scooby-Doo, hadn't he?
I don't know. Probably had guested on it or something.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised because Scooby-Doo had been going on for 10, 11 years by the time this movie came out. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, it does. This sort of, I would say, yeah, I agree with you. This movie sort of feels like a Scooby-Doo episode in a way. Yeah. It's no Jabberjaw, but hey. Yeah. I have no more questions for you, Alan. Is there anything you want to add before we go?
No, I think I look at the best of this and the routines that these guys perfected over the years. It's great. It's not the best work they've done, but it's vintage. So
I do like the fact that they had a gun that went off every hour.
Yeah, I mean that just comes out of nowhere. That's out of Tim Conway's mind. He probably just had somebody rig that up and just pulled it out in a scene without even telling him.
I would have loved to ask the production crew, like, hey, how long did it take you to work on that after he
Really?
pitched it?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Seriously.
oh my god. For Alan Gallant and Patrick McCray, I'm Joel Sage. A link to Alan Gallant's YouTube channel, Colin Sport After Dark, will be in the description box. Go check him out and give him a sub. He's also on Facebook. Link to Patrick McCray's Dark Shadows Book Unbound will be in the description box as well. Go pick up a copy if you don't have it. Good night.
Have a good evening.